Hello, everybody. Good to have you all here today. As promised last month, Roberto is here with the part number 3 from the moral laws. For those who are watching us for the first time, Roberto Watanabe, he is president of the State of São Paulo Spiritist Federation, and he is collaborating with the Irish Spiritist Federation in order to give uh, talks once a month about the Spiritism. And this year, he is focused on the Spiritist book, which is great. And as I said, and today he will talk about the moral laws in part 3. So I want to say thank you for all the board from FESP, also Roberto for being here with us. And thank you for joining us. We already have Pacho Oliveira is with us today. So let me see if we have any other people. No, people are still joining. So while people join, good evening, Roberto. How are you, my friend?
I'm fine, thank you, Stevan. Glad to be here with you all again.
Yes, yes. This is a great partnership we formed,
Yeah,
which is great to have to have you here, my friend.
thank you.
Um, let's do the initial prayer so we can gives more time people to join. Say, Lou VM is here with us. Lou, thank you. So let's raise up our thoughts, connect with our mentors of this show, mentors of Kardec Radio, who gave us the opportunity to broadcast around the world. Thank our mentors to make it possible. May this prayer reach those brothers and sisters who are in need, especially those who are in the war zones. May the peace, may the love reach their hearts, reach their souls. Amen. Okay, my friend. Uh, okay, we have already 22 people, so I think they are here to listen to you instead of me talking. So I let me put the deck. Okay, and off you go. Let me know if you need me.
Okay, thank you, Stevan. So today we are going to see the last part of the moral laws, and we are going to see this last two laws. We have 10 moral laws, and then we've seen today the law of equality and the law of justice, love, and charity. And then we are finished this book three of the Spirited book, seeing the last chapter, which is moral perfection. So let's start by the law of equality. We have the natural equality. Natural equality means that we all are equal before God, and we all tend to the same goal. We have already seen in the Spirited book and the book two that God created all of us simple and ignorant, and then we through reincarnation we will reach perfection, the relative perfection, right? Because absolute perfection only God has, and that's why we are equal before God. Uh, we we are created the same way, and we all have the same target, the same goal, right? And God has made the divine laws for everybody. The laws that we are studying in these three parts. We are all born with the same fragility, meaning we are in our corporeal body, in a physical body, which is subject to illness, to accident, and these are means the fragility that we have, right? And we are subject to the same sufferings, depending on what we must go through in order to evolve. And the Spiritist book says that the bodies of the rich as the poor, they equally decompose. So in this part here, we are referring to the corporeal part of ourselves, which is our body, right? Physical body. And so, therefore, God has not granted any natural superiority to anyone, either by birth or by death. Right? We all we come to this world the same way, and we leave this world the same way. That's a debate for the natural equality here. Huh? But there are there is inequality of aptitudes. Although we are all equal before God, we have different aptitudes, because even though God has created all spirits equal, all of us equal, we have a difference among us, because some has lived more or less than others, and has consequently developed more or fewer aptitudes. And so it means that we were not created at the same time, right? So some were created in a more, let's say, in a certain point of time, and others was created after that point of time. So it means that those who were created first had the more opportunities to evolve. So that's why we have a difference of aptitudes. But another reason for our difference of aptitudes is also free will, because suppose that the two persons were created at the same time, but because of their free will, one of those persons decided to go through the good way, let's say, and the other the evil way. So there we would have also some different of aptitudes, right? So that's the second reason for inequality of aptitudes. And we need a bunch or medley of aptitudes to in order to evolve and in order to contribute to the designs of providence. It means that we must learn lots of things. We must live in many different situations, and because of that also we as a result of that we have this inequality of aptitudes. But that's something normal, right? That's what's being said here. There is also the social inequality. There are also the social inequalities, and but that kind of inequalities are the work of ourselves as humankind, right, and not of God. Because we have, for example, the person which is very rich, another which is very poor, and the person who is rich is not concerned about the other, right? Which is in a world, is not in a bad, in a good situation. And that's why we have this kind of a social inequality. That's why we see today in our world people still starving, hungry, right? So, and such situations are destined to disappear uh, when we won't have it anymore the predominance of a pride and selfishness. And then in that case, we will have only the difference of a merit. So there will be social inequalities, but because of difference of a merit and not because of a pride and selfishness. That's what is being said here. And also, those that abuse the superiority that they have because of their social position by oppressing the weak, they may reborn in the opposite condition, it means they may be born in the future in the weak side, right? So in order to experiment what is the situation on the opposite side, right? So this is important for us as spiritists in order to have, as I have said, I already have said, we must have many kinds of experiences in this world uh, through our reincarnation, right? So that's something important to us. And we are, because of the social inequalities, is tightly linked to issue of inequalities of wealth, right? Because um, so absolute equality of wealth is not possible in our world because of a difference of aptitudes, diversity of faculties and characters. Someone have more skills to let's say to become rich, and others not that much. So that's why we have such inequalities of wealth, right? But such inequality is justified only if the wealth that someone has accumulated is not the result of a fraud and robbery. Well, it means that it should be the result of an honest work, right? So also, if we have such kind of inequalities of wealth, that doesn't mean that the person who has lots of richness should not concern about the ones who doesn't have the necessary to live, right? So that's why we see in the Spirit's book that society must be held responsible for those persons that fall into deprivation and poverty, because society responsible for the moral education of each member. So it means, on one side, that if we have people who fall into deprivation and poverty, is because they didn't receive the moral education, which is a responsibility of a society. So if we have such kind of a result, then society must be held responsible for that. And for example, for the social security that we have, right, in some countries, in order to provide for those who are needed the minimum to live, right? So that's why it is frequently the Spiritist book says the bad education that distorts this person's judgment instead of stifling their harmful tendencies. So this is very interesting here, right? So we have inequality of wealth, but that doesn't mean that the poor people or those who are in deeper deprivation should suffer from that alone, right? That's what's been said here. And wealth and poverty are trials that we as spiritists have, and God considers wealth uh, for some of us and poverty to others in order to test every one of us differently, because in many times such a kind of a trials are chosen by we ourselves before we incarnate here in this world, right? So and frequently we fail to in such trials because they are very difficult. The trial of wealth, for example, um, wealth leads to all kind of excesses. So to if you are rich, you can fulfill many of almost all of the desires you have, right? And that in the spiritual meaning sense would be something bad to us. And poverty, from the other hand, provokes complaining against the providence. So that's why indeed we suffer, right? We suffer the lack of the minimum we need to live in some situations. So those are two different difficult and dangerous trials. So it means that if we think normally, we can think, well, poverty, I understand, but richness, well, why is that a difficult trial? When we say that, we are not thinking in the material life, right? But in the spiritual life. So, looking from the spiritual side, uh, um, richness is wealth. Wealth is really a difficult trial, right? Then, now, in the law of equality, we also must have this. Talk about the equality of rights between men and women, because in our world today and in the history, we have a situation where uh, women has not didn't have, still today don't have the same rights as men, right? So that's the kind of inequality, right? So uh, that's why the Spiritist book says that moral inferiority of women in certain regions come from the unjust and cruel dominion that men have exerted over them, right? So that's something that happened, I wouldn't say in certain regions, but in most of the regions of this world, right? In some way, on or in the other, right? Because until today, women, for example, in work, right? Women has less salary than men. They occupied less top positions in the companies. So women has to work in the company and then the, have a kind of a double task, right? Because take work in the company and then must take care of their home. So all of this is something that causes this inequality, right, between men and women. So, in order to be just, human law should consecrate the equality of rights between men and women, although not of functions, because functions of men and women are different, but their rights should be the same. And also, we know here that sex exists only in the physical organization. We knew from this book two of the spiritual book that we as the spirits we can incarnate as men or women, right? So uh, everybody which is today is a man in the past has was incarnated as women, and vice versa, right? So because this also is important for the development of the spirits. So since sex exists only in the physical organization, and since spirits can become either men or women, uh, at the end of the day, there are no difference between them. So that's what's been said here. So and that justify the equality of rights that should we should have between men and women. Now let's talk a little bit about the law for justice, love, and charity, the last law, right? So the Spiritists say that this law is the most important of all the 10. In some sense, it comprises all the others. And let's start by justice, right? So the relationship between justice and natural rights. And what we see here is that the sentiment of justice is natural. It's so natural in us that we revolt at the thought, or if we see an injustice being done, right? So that's because the sentiment of justice is in ourselves, in our conscience. And so that's why the Spiritist books say that God has placed such a sentiment of justice in our heart, right, in the human heart. And and that's why we find such notions of justice not only in the knowledgeable people, right, but also on the very simple people, because God has placed in the heart of everybody. but we can understand justice in a different way because of the passions that we have, right? In most of us, the sentiment of justice is is mixed with the passions, and then we have a little bit distorted the sentiment of justice, right? For example, think for example in the situation that I I, I want my friends to to have it. I want justice to my friend, but not necessarily to my enemies, for example. Right? So here we have this sentiment of justice mixed with the passion. And what is justice after all, right? Justice consists in respecting the rights of others. So, and such rights are determined by two things: the human law and natural law. When we say human law is the law that we have, right? The civil law, criminal law, corporate laws, and the natural law is the law of God. It's something that we are studying here. And the rights established by human laws do not always conform to justice and only regulate certain social relations. Let's think, for example, about the death penalty, right? Death penalty is a human law, but is not in conformity with the natural law, because in natural law we defend life, right? And we will see that in a moment. This the most important right of every one of us is the life is the right to stay alive. So death penalty is something that goes against it, right? So, but that is a human law, which is as humankind develops, such kind of a law will be replaced by more just laws. And also, human laws, they reach only the exterior that we make, right? Because in private life, there are a huge number of actions that are the exclusive jurisdiction of the court of our conscience, right? So it means that, for example, I can I can do something good to someone, but what is important in moral dimension is the intention that moves me to do that action, right? If I have some interest in that, that is not morally correct, right? So but this kind of thing, the intention that I have when I do something good to someone or something bad to someone, uh, such intention is not reached by the human law. The human law does not see that, right? They only can see what can be proved, right? So the intention is something that is in our conscience. But we have our conscience. So remember that God has put in our heart or in our conscience the sentiment of justice. So if we do something wrong, even if the human law doesn't reach us, our conscience knows that, right? And that that means here the court of conscience. And justice based on natural law is that of Christ, right? Natural law is the law of God. So, and that's why Christ told us, right? So, do unto others whatsoever you would have them do unto you. So, this is the golden rule, right? Is known as the golden rule, and God could not give us a safer guide than our own conscience. So it means that I'm in doubt in some action that I'm going to do, just to think in that way, and then we will know if we should or should not do that action, right? And that's why the criterion for true justice is in designing for others what we would desire for ourselves, and not in designing for ourselves what we would desire for others, because that is not the same thing. Why? Because if we desire for others what we desire for ourselves, we will always desire good for others, because we of course always desire good for ourselves, right? But designing for ourselves what we would desire for others is not the same thing, because in some situation, for example, a person who has an enemy, he would desire a bad for other, right? But he would not and would never desire bad for himself or herself, right? So that's why it's not the same thing here. And so we have a very simple and criterion to know to judge our actions here is based on the natural law. Let's talk now about the right of ownership, but before that, we have here the right to stay alive. So the first of all the natural rights of we humans is the right to stay alive. So because we have such a right to stay alive, then it gives us the right to accumulate what is needed to live, right, through honest labor and not as selfish individuals. So it means that we can accumulate what's needed to our life, but if that was accumulated through honest labor and not through fraud or robbery, as we have seen already, right? And not to accumulate just for accumulating, right? As selfish individuals. We accumulate and we have much more than we need. So that would not be something good, right? And but anyway, assets accumulated in this through honest labor are legitimate property, and then we have the right to defend it in the court, right? In the human law, through human law. Um, because the ownership of these assets comprises a natural right that is as sacred as the right to work and the right to stay alive. So that's why theft, for example, is something that is out of this kind of a right, right? If it's someone accumulated assets by theft, that would not be something a legitimate property in this case, right? So let's talking now. After talking about justice, let's talk about charity and love for our neighbor. When we think about charity, normally people think about the alms giving, right? So to give it something to someone which is in need for that in order to live, and charity is not restricted to this, right? Because in Brazil, for example, we have this problem, right? We have lots of people who need charity in this sense, which everybody is thinking about. But charity is not restricted to that. If we go to Europe, for example, we don't have it much such situation. But even there, charity is also needed because charity embraces all our relations with our fellow humans. So that's why the true meaning of the word charity is benevolence toward everyone, indulgence toward the imperfection of others, and forgiveness for offenses. So that is something universal, right? So it's not related to material situation or someone, right? And we must think charity in this way. So, and that's why love and charity supplement the law of justice, because loving our neighbors is to do them all the good possible we can do. So that's why Jesus said, right, love one another as brothers and sisters. And he also taught us, right, love even your enemies. It's not to mean by love our enemies is not trying to be friendly with them, right? But to forgive them the offenses that they they make to us, and to return good for their evil. For example, praying for them, for example, right? Making a prayer for them, and so that would be a love our enemies, as Jesus taught us. And so here we see that love and charity has a very broad meaning, right? It's not something restricted. And true charity is always good and benevolent. So it is demonstrated in the act itself and in the way it's done. Because sometimes, for example, I can let's think about in a material situation, right? I can help someone who is in need of something material, but I can help him or her, and at the same time, I can, in some way, do in a way that the person becomes humiliated by that, right? By that action. So that would not be something good. So that's why true charity is demonstrated in the act itself, to help someone, a service, and in the way it's done. So that's why it's said here that a service rendered with graciousness has a double value, because you help, and you help in a way that the person does not feel humiliated. And ostentation, which is the opposite, it erases the merit of benevolence. Like Jesus said, right? Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. So we must do the benevolence by itself, right? With no motive, right? Ulterior motive. And so let's now talk in the last chapter about moral perfection. Is the chapter 12 of the book 3 of the Spirited book, which is starting by talking about the virtues and vices. So there is always virtue when there is voluntary resistance to the attraction of evil tendencies. So here is something interesting, because uh, I would say that most of the time we feel ashamed because we have a attraction to evil tendencies. Well, we should not have that feel ashamed, because we are imperfect beings. So by being perfect, we are attracted to evil tendencies. So the issue here is not to have the attraction of evil tendencies, but is to resist to such attraction. So that is virtue. That's very important to have in mind, right? Um, think, for example, about those monks in the Middle Ages, right? Who beat themselves, right? But because their body, well, this body is covered with sin. I must punish this body that I have, right? So that's something that has no sense, because they did that because they felt the attraction of evil tendencies. But that's natural, because we are imperfect beings. So what they should do is to offer voluntary resistance to such attractions, and not to punish their own body, right? So that's what's being said here at the end of the day. So, and the highest virtue consists in the sacrifice of one's own interest for the good of one's neighbor without any further motives. So virtue is not always resist to the attraction of evil tendencies, but we have also a positive side here, which is to sacrifice our own interest. So it means a positive action in toward someone, right? So that is the highest virtue, with no interest, right? So that is the highest virtue. And regarding vices, we have selfishness as the root of vices, because all evil derives from it, right? If we study all the vices, we will see that selfishness is at the bottom of them all. So that's why selfishness, of course, is incompatible with justice, love, and charity. It neutralizes all other qualities. So it's clear here, right? So what we should do to combat our selfishness sentiment, right? And to develop a virtue by resisting to our the attraction we feel uh, um, naturally to evil tendencies, and also do good action, right? To somebody with no further motives. And so that's why the spiritists say that the selfishness is the source of all vices, as well as charity is the source of all virtues. But selfishness will be weakened with the predominance of the moral life over the material life, and that's something that is spiritism is trying is striving forward, right? To distress to we all the importance of the moral life, right, over the material life. When we reach that point, then selfishness will be weakened, and as we humans become enlightened by about the spiritual things, which is something spiritism is trying to do it all the time, then we will attach less value to material things. And but we also need to reform all human institutions, right? That entertain and excite passions. So passions is an important issue here when we talk about virtue and vices, right? And this reform of human institutions depends on education. But what is passion anyway, right? Is it something good or is it something bad? Well, passion is the result of excess brought about by our will, uh, though the principle itself was given to us for our good, right? Because passion is what moves us, right? If I want to fulfill something, something that I want to fulfill, I needed to have a passion, right? So that's why we see here that the passions can lead humans to do great things. The problem is the abuse of a passion, right? That's what makes them evil. So that's something important to have in mind here, right? So is the abuse. So they are like a horse that is useful when it is controlled, right? But it's dangerous when the horse controls, right? The rider, right? So uh, that's a interesting analogy here with the passion. And those who try to restrain their passions, avoiding the excess, those people understand their own spiritual nature, right? So that's something important that we must think here. Passion is not something bad, right? It's what's given to us for our good, but we must take care of not going into excess. So that would be evil. So that's what we said here, teach it here, right? So and persons who are divested of selfishness and who practice charity exist in greater number than we might think, because we always say, right, that well, we live in a world of trials and expiations. We are here, we have the predominance of evil over good. So this is our world. That's why we see wars, we see conflicts, right? We see lots of violence and inequalities, lots of inequalities. But what's interesting to see is that the most of the person who live in this present world are good people, right? So that's what's been said here. So they exist in greater number than we might think. Why that? Why is that? Right? It's because, like it said here, right? So, virtue does not seek to reveal itself in broad daylight, right? Virtuous people does not show themselves or to everybody. They act in silently, right? So, and that's why when human beings have been freed from the selfishness that dominates them, they will live as brothers and sisters. So uh, that part of the human beings that still are dominated by selfishness, when they get rid of that, then they will live as brothers and sisters. That's what's being said here, right? So in that case, when we live as brothers and sisters, then we have the strong supporting. Being the support and not the oppressor of the weak, right? And no longer will anyone lack what is needed. So something that we saw before, right? So society would take care of those who are in need. So because we will live as brothers and sisters. We will think about not only about ourselves and our fellows, our relatives, for example, our friends, but also for the others, right? And this is the kingdom of the good that the Spiritism are in charge of preparing. So that's something that Spiritism is striving, right, for to fulfill, to accomplish in on earth. Let's talk a little bit then about the characteristics of a moral person. What is a what is a moral person, right? So moral person, of course, are those that who practice the law of just love and charity in its greatest purity. So it means that they practice such law without any selfish intention, right? So no interest, with disinterest. They know that all vicissitudes they face in life are trials or expiations, and well, from the past, right, from past actions, and then they accept them without complaining. They respect all sincere convictions. For example, if someone does not think like I do, I will accept that, right? I will respect it, and so and they do not anathematize those who don't think like they do. They study their own imperfection instead of studying the imperfection of others, right? And strives incessantly to combat those imperfections. And so we can say that such persons are truly free. It's not very easy, right, to find such kind of a person in this world because they are, as we just saw, right? They are not exposing themselves, but there are such kind of a person, right, in our world. And what is the effective mean, right, for improving ourselves to become a moral person? So the most important thing is self knowledge, and uh, improve it's knowing ourselves and resisting the draw of evil. So that's why the Spiritus books say that actually it's Saint Augustine which is saying here, right? A sage of antiquity, which is Socrates, right? That Greek philosopher from the 50th century before Christ, right? Uh, Socrates has already told us, know thyself. And what is the recommendation of Saint Augustine, right? Who lived in the fourth to 50th century after Christ? And his recommendation is that we should, at the end of the day, examine our own conscience, and then we should ask ourselves whether we had or not failed to fulfill some duty to do some good for in this case, right? And also whether or not anyone might have had reason to complain about us. So if we did any evil to somebody, right? So it's very simple here to do all the good we can, the good possible, and not to do any evil to anyone, right? So it's simple like that. If the answer to those questions would be yes for the first question and no for the second question, then we could repose our head in our pillow, right? And have a love dreams, right? Uh, Good dreams. So that's why St. Augustine say that the answer will be either repose for our conscience or an indication of a wrong that we still must amend, must correct, right? So to making this examination daily in a daily basis, we can improve ourselves as- in a very effective way, right? So that's what is being said here. And what's important here is to see here is that such improvement of ourselves is not something that we do a great thing, right? But it's something that we do every day, right? But every day. So it's like we say that if someone must uh, run 10 kilometers, it must start by the first step, right? Step by step, and then they reach the target. So it's the same here at the recommendation of Saint Augustine. And with that, we should then reach the moral perfection that is the goal, as we saw in the beginning, the Spirit's book, the goal of all of us, right? To reach relative perfection. So that's what I had to bring in to you today. So we saw today the part three: law of equality, law of justice, love and charity, and moral perfection. Next month, the 21st of November, we will see the book four of the Spirit's book, which is Hopes and Consolations. We will see the two chapters, Earthly Joys and Sorrows and Future Joys and Sorrows. And with that, we will conclude the Spirit's book this year, right? And then next year, we will start a new book, which is Heaven and Hell. Thank you to having me today. And now I go to Stevan. Stevan?
Okay, my friend. So it's good to have this. Okay, let me see that. There are comments here already. Better, Patch was faster than me. Looking forward for the next presentation. For now, a lot of think about. Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Patch, for your time.
Mm.
Well, the next one it's probably
Uh,
it'll be November or January.
November 21st. It
November
is the
21st.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. Because I know in December sometimes we don't do it because it's holiday. Yeah.
Uh,
So 21st of November of
yeah. Then
November.
we will end the Spiritus book,
Yeah.
and then next year we start a new book,
Yeah.
Heaven and Hell, like we have talked
Yes.
about, right?
Yes. Good. Good. Well, it's brilliant. So thank you so much, Roberto, for your time. Thank you, Lou. Thank you, Pachi. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Roberta. Thank you, Naka Ivanovic. Thank you for your time. And before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone we will have our healing, virtual healing today at 8:30 p.m. Irish time. So in about 25 minutes, you just need to go to our YouTube page. You don't need any link. It is just go to Spiritism Ireland, and the meeting will be broadcasting from there. Okay. So thank you, and Roberto, once again, uh, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Stephen.
We don't have any questions here, so I think we can wrap up and get people prepared for the virtual healing. Would you
Okay,
mind to do our final prayer, my friend?
sure, sure. So thank
Yeah.
you all for this nice meeting, and then let's prepare to end our meeting today. And thank all the spiritual benefactors for all the support they gave us. They always give us in whenever we are reunited here in the name of Jesus. It means by thinking about what's good for our development, intellectual and moral, and then the all the spiritual benefactors will be with us, helping us, supporting us, inspiring us. So thank you everybody for such help. And finally, we will want to thank God for the life that this incarnation that we have, where we find and know this spiritism that help us in such a path to the relative perfection. So be it.
Amen. Okay. Thank you, my friends. I'll see you next Thursday. Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.